welcome. Let me get you in here.
I'm in.
And we're going to test you right away here. I'm going to make you co-host. So you will be able to share your screen. There you go. Yep. You're in.
Cool. Should I take it from here, or are you
Well, let me do a quick intro, and then I got a couple questions for you, and then we can go right from there. How about that?
That sounds good to me.
So you like Matthew or Matt, or how do you prefer to be?
Matt is usually what people call me, so that'll work.
Okay. All right, Matt. So tonight, I have to thank Deb Pritchard. So she has been helping take care of the programming for our Bird Club programs and speakers. She kind of came up with the idea of this program tonight with the Winter Finches. So Matt A. Young is going to talk about Finch Irruptions and launching of the Finch Research Network, where he plans to go in the future, and with the forecast and research he'll be doing at FiRN. Matthew is the president and founder of the Finch Research Network. We'll talk about these interesting and beautiful winter finches and what led to the formation of the Finch Research Network and what the Finch Research Network plans to accomplish in the future. Matt has spent the last 25 years working in the social work field with special needs adolescents, and has worked at Cornell Labs of ornithology for 15 plus years, where he did extensive field work with the lab's Cerulean and golden wing warblers atlas projects, and was the project lead on the lab's first eruptive bird survey for bird source in 1999. You don't seem that old.
I'm not. I actually have done, so I've done 11 years in social work field, and I did 15 years at the lab.
Okay.
So that was across 25 years. I did those two things. So
yeah.
So yeah, I'm only 52.
Oh. All right. He's been a tour guide for Victor Emmanuel Nature Tours, written species accounts for breeding bird atlases and birds of the world. He's published several papers about red crossbills, vocal complex, and native orchids. So he's currently working on the finches of North America with Lillian Stokes, and is also the president and founder of the Finch Research Network. So with that, let's welcome Matt.
Hey, thanks for having me again. It's always a pleasure to talk to everybody. It was an interesting last 15 minutes here. I gotta say, I was a little late coming in. I apologize for that, but I just switched offices at my office, and 7 minutes or 8 minutes before this meeting, I tried to get in. Nobody was there, or maybe it was about 12 minutes. I went out to get water, and my door locked behind me with my keys, my computer, and my presentation. So luckily, I was able to get a hold of somebody on campus still, and they let me in. And so that's why I was a little bit late. So I was a little panicky not only about 5-6 minutes ago. But anyway, it's great to be here tonight and to talk about finches. Anybody that's ever engaged with me over the years, I've been doing this for about 25 years now. You know, I can talk finches for a very long time. This is me right here, obviously, with some red poles that I'm feeding, with some finch attire on there, some grosbeak attire. Now, I always try to give people a little bit of the, how did I end up where I am today? Because I think it makes a heck of a lot more interesting of a presentation. My story basically is I finished a degree in hydrogeology, meteorology at SUNY Oneonta in 1995. I realized I did not want to go into that hydrogeology, meteorology. I'm still a lover of meteorology and geology, but at the time, the job that actually was most common was something called a field that was called lust. leaky underground studying of monitoring of leaky underground storage tanks, like old abandoned storage tanks. And so that last semester at the end, I knew I wasn't necessarily going to go into that field. But, you know, these are building blocks in life a lot of times. So what I did is I bought a car, a pair of binoculars. I went to a Grateful Dead show and I headed west. And I landed in Yellowstone, where I had a job as a host at the Lake Yellowstone Inn. And the first day I was there, I grabbed those binoculars. I went to Lower Falls. This is Lower Falls. And while I was there overlooking the falls, a flock of birds flew in above me. And I looked up. I remember putting my bins on them. And that you could see like seed coats falling down. And they were red crossbills. And, you know, you don't know these moments in lifetime when they happen to you. But my whole trajectory of life changed from that moment on. I became kind of very interested in birds, particularly finches. My outlook on life changed, and it only continued in that direction. So it's a pretty amazing sometimes the power of nature and how it can kind of guide you and kind of move you, like anything in life to some degree, but particularly nature. I then, from Yellowstone, I worked in Yellowstone for 3 months, and then I landed in this spot after Yellowstone. I went to Yellowstone, it was June of '95. I was early June. It was late August, early September. I landed at Trout Lake, Washington. This is the base of Mount Adams. I was in the first full pilot, or kind of full year. They did a pilot or 2 years before that, but AmeriCorps, which is kind of a domestic-based Peace Corps. And it was at that time that I really, you know, started to, like, you know, really own, you know, kind of dial in my interest in finches. I used to do these carnivore camera set snowshoe treks into the wilderness areas at Mount Adams for an AmeriCorps project. We were trying to document whether there were, at the time, with pine marten and Canada lynx or not in the Gifford Pinchot National Forest. And on those hikes, I could always rely on one group of birds, and it was finches. It was great to see crossbills and grosbeaks and siskins dancing at the top of treetops. So just to kind of to bring everybody, I was in AmeriCorps there, and then I went to the Everglades. I was in AmeriCorps there as well. My whole career kind of shifted, just to kind of bring everybody to that moment at Yellowstone. Oh, shoot, I wonder if this is going to play. Oh, there we go. I'm going to play a little video here. It'll take you to that moment there. I was at Yellowstone.
Of the 10,000 bird species on Earth, only 5, all in the finch family, have crossed bills. The white-winged crossbill is found in the higher latitudes of North America, traveling from coast to coast in large flocks in search of white spruce trees. Females are greenish-yellow, males red, and both have 2 distinct white bars on the wings. Their unique crossed bill, with the lower mandible curving under the upper maxilla, is adapted to reach heavily protected seeds found under tough cone scales. To reach the seeds, a white-wing places the tip of the curved lower mandible against the cone while inserting the upper maxilla under the scale. Beak partially open, the bird uses the curved mandible as a lever, twisting his head as he pries up the scale. He eats the seed, discarding the husk. The curve of the mandible provides the leverage needed to force the scale up, enabling crossbills to feed on seeds that are not accessible to other species. A white-wing often twists the cone off and carries it to a perch where it holds the cone in one claw and rotates it like a corn cob. Lower mandibles cross either left or right, and each individual always holds the cone.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. let's go back to that. We'll scope.
The curve of the mandible provides the leverage needed to force the scale up, enabling crossbills to feed on seeds that are not accessible to other species. A white-wing often twists the cone off and carries it to a perch where it holds the cone in one claw and rotates it like a corn cob. Lower mandibles cross either left or right, and each individual always holds the cone in the claw toward which their mandible curves.
So those are seed coats dropping.
This ensures that the tip of the mandible is facing the cone, giving the bird the best leverage to quickly pluck the seeds. White-wings are remarkably efficient at harvesting their food. An individual bird can eat up to 3,000 seeds per day. Crossbills are able to swiftly bypass a conifer's armor as a direct result of their specialized beaks, an excellent example of evolutionary adaptation.
So yeah, as I was saying there, you could see seed coats falling at various times. I was at the lab of, this was 2008. I had found this flock of white-winged crossbills feeding on white spruce. We brought the crew out there, and we did some filming, and I helped do the narration and some of the voiceovers as well, to kind of help the person that was doing the final narration. So anyway, it was super exciting. That was that moment where I was Yellowstone. I had sea coats falling on me, and here I am now, we're 28 years later now from then. Is that right? Yeah, I guess we are. So, no, 28 years later, 27 to 28 years later, I launched the Finch Research Network. Now, this thing kind of started in about 2014. There was a group of us that were very interested in crossbill recordings, and people were sending crossbill recordings to a bunch of us to ID, to call type. I had been doing it since the mid 2000s, but the kind of network grew, and a few of us said, hey, maybe someday we'll launch this thing. And so we launched it. It's worldwide. We want everybody to be part of it. We have a board of directors. It's a 501c3 board of directors. We have professors from UC Davis, Oregon State, Washington State, Cornell, et cetera, et cetera. We have Finch forecaster Tyler Orr, who took over for Ron Pittaway. He's on the board. So we're really, really kind of been cranking here the last 2 years. I could not have planned a better few years to a beginning of an organization. And again, we want everybody to kind of be part of it. We kind of dedicated it, or we call the founders of the site or this network, Ian Newton and Ron Pittaway. And Ron is of course the emeritus status Finch forecaster that did the Winter Finch forecast for 21 years before he handed it off to Tyler. Ian Newton wrote the original Finches book in the UK. So anybody can get involved, whether it's you want to do recordings of finches in the field, crossbills or grosbeaks, or whether you want to do artwork. We have some artwork up on our site as well. Or whether you just want to be a writer. I mean, we're constantly looking for people that want to be part of this network, and it's grown pretty fast. It's almost a full-time job in some ways outside of my day job, which again, I run a program where I work with special needs kids, connecting them to needs or services in the community so they can stay in their home. So where are we going with the Finch Network and all things Finch? It's wellness, education, research, conservation. Yes, wellness is a big part of what I believe in. It's probably not shocking to you, given that I kind of in these what seems to be two disparate fields of interest. 15 years, like I said, at Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and 11 years now working in the social work field. I'm a big believer in wellness, and all of us are in the sense of getting outdoors, engaging with nature, observing birds, or even just if you're at your window looking out and looking at bird feeders. Finches make up the largest cohort, both in individuals and also diversity at bird feeders. So I'm a big believer in wellness around what we do. And it's important for scientists, I think, to talk about their story, how it impacted them, and how we appreciate nature, not just label it. So wellness, observing nature and engaging with nature by getting outdoors. I have an LLC called Mindful Nature Expeditions. So again, I do some guiding on the side and do some classes. I do a lot of these presentations, and any kid in my program that shows an interest in nature, I give them a pair of binoculars. And if they want a bird feeder at their house, I'll do that as well. I'll put it up for them. So studies upon studies upon studies at this point now are coming out about the benefits of engaging with nature. Doctors in Canada are starting to prescribe, take a walk out, at your local, like free passes to the national parks up there. Doctors in the UK are also starting to prescribe, walks outside. So again, I'm a big believer, and it starts right outside your own window a lot of times. So there's a red poll and a goldfinch. And just to kind of, obviously the eruptive finches are kind of have this mystique to them. Are we going to get them this year? Are we not going to get them? But I like to always make a plug for house finches and goldfinches. They make up the largest, in a lot of ways, cohort of individuals at many feeders and feeder watch across the lower 48. Just to kind of highlight how much, finches can kind of like liven up a backyard. Here is a video actually from Ryan Brady. I think some of you might know Ryan, how red poles took over parts of the Great Lakes region last year. Well, let's see here. Let's go back to that. Pretty amazing. Estimates were at least above 500 red poles in his yard last spring. This was it was either March or April. I think it was March. But pretty unbelievable the amount of red poles he was feeding last year. And this year he's feeding a couple hundred evening grosbeaks. So, finches in a lot of ways, again, they bring a lot of joy to our lives. We don't always get them every year. So they're like little Christmas presents, I feel like. That's the way I've always been, had such interest in them over the years, because it's just, there's a mystery to them and excitement to them, and they're social. I'm gonna keep moving on here. So, just the central region, this is I just pulled a random, it's not so random. It was a central region 2021-22 top 25 feeder birds for Project Feeder Watch for the central region. And you can see that there were, maybe I pulled it. No, there was, red pole, purple finch at 16, 17, and goldfinch at 8, and house finch at 6. So basically 25% of your top birds were finches last year in that region. And you can see the flock size of finches is often quite high as well. I mean, the red pole flock size was 19 birds there. And then goldfinch is almost 7, house finch almost 5. So again, they make up a big cohort. Now, the Winter Finch forecast 2022 forecasting and updates. As I said, Tyler, we launched this actually with the Winter Finch forecast, Tyler's first Winter Finch forecast in 2020. We launched the Finch Research Network with it. And here's kind of the origins of the Winter Finch forecast, started by Ron Pittaway in 1999, which was the same year I did the first Winter Finch Irruptive Bird Survey for the Cornell Lab for BirdSource. And now BirdSource, I am dating myself a little bit here. I don't know if anybody out there remembers BirdSource predated eBird, actually. It was like the ramp up into eBird was BirdSource. The format evolved, and it's basically been in the same format now for 20 years. Again, this network would not be possible today if it wasn't for Ron in a lot of ways. He really is kind of popularized finches. He asked me to start doing the crossbills part of the forecast, so there was always a plug for me, dating back, more than a decade now, at least 12, 13 years. And so the give the basic landscape of this, most of these kind of unpredictable finches, a great percentage of the populations for the eastern eruptive finches are in the boreal forest. The crossbills, the red poles, the grosbeaks. Purple finches, obviously a little bit more further south year round as their nesting zone or breeding zone. But that's the boreal forest. And here, the dots, they're a little hard to see, but that's the number. There's almost 100 people now across the boreal forest, all along the northern tier states of the United States, and from coast to coast in the boreal, from Newfoundland to Vancouver, British Columbia. There are people that give reports on, food assessments for these finches. And that's how we put this thing together. This is how, Tyler and I, it's like, forecasting central there, and the lead up to the forecast always comes out the end of September. And there, we kind of go back and forth. He gets the assessments, we mull them over, and then we put out our predictions the end of September. Now, a lot of times finches don't really start to materialize until October, mid-October, late October. And this is these are the species that we generally are looking for people to give us assessments on. The conifer crops kind of drive these eruptions with crossbills. The seed crops, the deciduous seed crops, believe it or not, also play a big role with grosbeaks, and particularly the red poles. The red poles are kind of driven by alder birch crops. The fruiting ones, the fruiting trees also play a big role with pine grosbeaks. So we basically ask people to do a ranking, from poor or none to bumper crop. And I'll get to this. I'll come back to this a little bit later in this presentation as well. Issues that affected this year's seed crop in the north were basically widespread drought in areas, intense and widespread forest fires, still continuing to have, quite a few more than average forest fires, even in the boreal forest at this point. There's lots and lots of fires that have been going on the last couple of years. Insect infestations, I'll talk about a little bit about spruce budworm. You think of these finches as mostly conifer seed-eating birds, but it's more dynamic than that, much more dynamic. Again, the crossbills, much more driven, obviously, by conifers. Siskins are kind of a generalist. They're part crossbill, they're part budworm bird, they're part weed seeds like goldfinches, they're part even birch crop birds like red poles. So this year, there's an amazing generational spruce cone crop across the whole entire western boreal. And quite frankly, this map should be extended down into the Rockies as well. That same spruce crop extends down into the Rockies. Just an amazing white spruce and Engelmann spruce cone crop. So there's not a lot of white-winged crossbills around this year. And I know this area, Ohio, is always kind of on the fringes of the finch stuff. Some years you get them. Some species are more common than others in your state. Others make, bigger news when they do show up. So eruptions and superflights of finches. So we had a superflight of finches in 2020, 2021, the year we launched the, Finch Research Network with the forecast. And you could not really have asked for it. I mean, we were all, it was the world really kind of was going through some of its hardest times, as we all know, with COVID. And really, I mean, if there's any silver lining at all that's come out of COVID, is the fact that it really, the one safe haven for all of us was kind of getting back outdoors again. I have family members that didn't put up bird feeders until COVID, and they got into it, and it became a source of relief and enjoyment for them. So we had this amazing super flight in 2021. Why such an eruption of finches that year? It was kind of a perfect storm of a few things that came together. There's natural cycles of finch eruptions. So we were kind of in a year that we expected some finches. There was a generational cone crop that had preceded the previous year that led to, so basically, you know, if you have a generational cone crop on spruces, and then you have this kind of, you know, growing spruce budworm outbreak. Now, spruce budworm, they're basically caterpillars in the boreal forest that defoliate spruce and fir trees, and they're baby making factories. A lot of people have heard of them, you know, the budworm, the spruce budworm warblers, Cape May warbler, Tennessee warbler, bay-breasted warbler. Well, believe it or not, a couple of the finches are actually budworm specialists. And so when you add up the natural cyclical nature, a generational cone crop the year before that led to tons of crossbills and siskin babies, and then you add a spruce budworm outbreak that was in year 6 or 7, and a growing population that was starting to happen with evening grosbeaks and purple finches, and even some of the other finches will also opportunistically feed on spruce budworm, and you had a perfect storm for a finch eruption. We had not seen really, it was the largest one since 1997-98. Now the following year, 21-22, last winter, there was a good breeding finch event in the northeastern states. Again, Ohio's kind of like just outside that zone. This year's a solid eruption. I would call it above average, but not anything extraordinary. Obviously, grosbeaks seem to be on a bit of an upswing because of these budworm outbreaks. Purple finches are also on an upswing because of that budworm outbreak as well. Just getting into the cast of characters here. I'll go through these somewhat quickly. You know, this is a shot I took through the window. It almost looks like a painting. Purple finches. There's some American goldfinches in there. There's also a head of an American tree sparrow. But yeah, purple finches. We had predicted that purple finches would kind of wage an above average flight this year. That has happened. You can see that they're all the way down into Florida. That doesn't happen in numbers. What is interesting this year is it's kind of an evenly distributed eruption. I have birds here in the north at my house in central New York, but there's birds. I know Bill Hilton, who at Hilton Bird Banding Observatory, I think that's something like that's the name. He's banded over 200 purple finches at his place in North Carolina. And it will be the 3rd year in a row that he's actually banded over 200, which will be the first time that's happened in a winter in North Carolina at his place since the early to mid 80s. So they are on the upswing, some of these finches, but they're also coming out of what are absolutely massive declines. So pine siskin, you know, 2 years ago when we had the super flight, they actually put on a flight that Audubon wrote an article I was quoted in that said siskins had taken over the country. It also that year, unfortunately, there was some salmonella outbreaks that occurred with pine siskins. We didn't really predict a big pine siskin flight this year, and that kind of pretty much is what has happened. They're kind of sprinkled here and there here in the east. The bird is much more year-round out in the mountain west, but there's not, as you go back to the purple finch, you can see there's some deep purples into the south here. You look at this pine siskin map, not a lot of deep purples into the south. You know, I actually just started to see some pine siskins here in New York just in the last couple of weeks, but there really hasn't been any around the last, I'd say, since mid-October at least. The red poles, a lot of you might not know, there was a genetic paper that actually started at my house. The study did at least in the winter of 2012. There was a crew that came out at Cornell, and it led to a paper that was published a couple of years ago, actually, November of 2021, saying that genetically, these birds are almost indistinguishable. But there's a gene expression button that is expressed in hoary redpolls that is not in common redpolls. I was surprised that there was not a proposal, though, for them to be lumped this past year, even though the paper is now, been out for 14 months. They could have put a proposal in, but I didn't see one. There was not one put in. So, but look for these two very well possibly being lumped together here in the next year or so. This is probably the one bird that, we predicted a, fairly sizable eruption this year, and it hasn't really materialized. Now, they sometimes do have these late eruptions materialize with common red poles, as late as late January sometimes, or even early February. You can have a ice event or successive snow events. I mean, if there's open ground, they're going to feed on weed seeds in the fields. We did get, I actually had one single red pole show up my house last week. Both days it showed up right as I was walking out the door to go to meetings, to go meet with a family I work with and a kid. And it's a pretty heavily debated. I have it up on my Facebook wall. It seems to point towards hoary red pole. Doesn't make a lot of sense because it hasn't been a lot of hoary red poles, or a lot of red poles in general around in the Northeast. You can see there's like light purples here in the Northeast. There's probably only been a couple records in Ohio, if any. I think there's been a few though since the fall. But anyway, just interesting. Yeah, I had a red pole show up. Now, red and white winged crossbills, I've kind of, even though I've been, and I've always said this to people, I was a finch person first that became a crossbill kind of focused researcher, mainly because red crossbills are such an interesting, that's where the biology in some ways is the most interesting, because there's this dynamic of call types in discrete populations that seem to actually act as good biological species most of their lives, but there is some hybridization going on. And I don't necessarily expect many crossbills. We just described, I'll get to this in a few minutes. We just described a new call type of red crossbills a few years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago. Type 9 was raised to species status. That's Cassia crossbill, if anybody's heard of that. I wonder if that bird will continue to be recognized as a full species, though. But here's the white-winged crossbill map. You can see, if you look at that map I showed earlier, the amazing spruce crop out west. These maps are a little bit misleading, these bubble maps. I wish they were a little bit more scaled according to, size of flock. But, most of the white-winged crossbills are out in the Western Boreal right now and singing their heads off. They breed at this time of the year in the middle of winter. If everybody doesn't know that, crossbills, probably one of the reasons why I've always been so fascinated with them for 25 years now, is, there are opportunistic nesters that can breed in the middle of winter at 10 below and 3 feet of snow on the ground. Now, red crossbill, like I said, we just described a new call type. We had been kind of working on this and heading this way for a good 5 to 10 years now. Most of this map is made up of this type 12, which is the old northeastern subspecies of red crossbill. It seems to be a medium-billed bird. It comes down the coast in years that it fails along, cone crops fail along the eastern seaboard, I should say, from Maine to Nova Scotia, and parts of New Hampshire, and the Adirondacks seems to be a core zone. But I'll show you a map of that soon. The grosbeaks, they were predicted to do, kind of have a good flight, both of them this year, and they have not disappointed. Again, finches are social, so they flock. So it's a little bit of a, their occurrence in any one area. I know when you predict these flights, people go, oh, I should be seeing them everywhere. Well, because of their sociality, when you hit them, you'll hit, 5, 10, 20, 50 of them. But, then you can drive 5, 10, 15, 20 miles and not come across any of them. And a lot of that is because of that sociality. They want to flock together. Pine grosbeaks, I just saw some in the kind of central, south, very southern edge of the Adirondacks. There's been a few reported south of the Adirondacks here in New York. so south of the thruway. So that's unusual to have them in numbers this far south. There are probably, I'm going to say, 2/3 of the years we don't get many pine grosbeaks, if any, in the Adirondacks even. But this year you can get quite a few of them up there. And evening grosbeaks, 2 years ago, they went to places that we had not seen since the 80s, when the last budworm outbreaks were raging across parts of the eastern boreal forest. This year, again, a well above average flight for this bird. There's been reports as far south as Arkansas, and there's some sizable, or at least moderate sized flocks in the Carolinas and the hills. So, and I think Ohio's had a decent number of evening grosbeaks, from what I remember. Now, what happens is they kind of move through, and then you end up having these little hot spots with these few flocks in the state, and I think that's probably what's happening in Ohio.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
Yes. So we're in southern Wisconsin, and in southern Wisconsin here, we there were a few evening grosbeaks. I would say early, like December up until Christmas, and now and we've had a real mild winter here.
Gotcha.
No snow here. You get like in the central part of the state, central Wisconsin, much more snow, and they have much more activity of evening grosbeaks.
Yeah.
We were up in the Zaxim Bog area over Christmas, and they were all over up there.
Yeah, they're here in New York too. There's lots and lots of birds in New York here. And again, I don't know why I'm mixing up my states. I kind of knew that this was Wisconsin, but for some reason I kept saying Ohio. Ryan is the one I think that recommended me to speak to this group, and he's a Wisconsin. I think he's up in Bayfield. He has a huge flock at his house. So you're not seeing many, Wisconsin's a long state kind of, the northern parts of the state, especially the northwestern part, seems to get in on a lot of these boreal events, whereas the southern part or southeastern part of the state doesn't always get in on these events all that much. So it sounds that way. You have none in the southern part of the state right now?
Yeah, nothing much at all. I said early we had some, first part of December, there was a few scattered around, and then checking eBird reports, I had nothing since the first of the year.
Nothing since the first. Gotcha. Interesting. I wonder sometimes in a year like this, sometimes they might retreat back north even. The finches, again, there's a mystique to them. You just don't know, how these things will 100% unfold. I'll get to this a little bit later, but we're hoping to expand. One of the things the Finch Research Network is really open to do is expand the network, like become a finch forecaster. So research and conservation, I'm going to jump into this now. And this is kind of a little bit of a throwing this out there now. We're going to be shifting towards actually doing a presentation on honey creepers, or Hawaii's finches. A lot of times people don't realize the honey creepers in Hawaii are a finch group, actually true fringillid finches. The story behind them is about 5 to 6 million years ago, a flock of Eurasian common rose finches, which are very closely related to purple finches, house finches, Cassin's finches, wandered or erupted and landed in Hawaii, and they adaptively radiated to 50-something species of honey creeper species. If Darwin had landed on Hawaii, we would not be looking at probably it's amazing. A lot of people here on the mainland don't know the crisis that's going on there. There's only 17 species left. There's a non-native avian malaria that's taking out a lot of the last remaining populations. And there's a number of really, really kind of dire conservation efforts that are taking place right now. And the Finch Research Network is getting involved in this, and we're actually collaborating with the Maui recovery team, and we've had discussions with University of Hawaii and also ABC. So if anybody wants a presentation on the honey creepers, the Hawaii's finches for next year, please do let me know, because we want to raise awareness and hopefully also raise funds to do what we can. It's a very complicated issue, though. So moving again to the finches that we all know a lot more about here in the eastern part of the United States. Red crossbills, again, one of the more complex taxonomic species of any group in North America due to these several call types. Some have described them as evolving or incipient species. There are now 12 call types. We just described a new one we were working on. I do not expect, I know a lot of people are like, dude, we're going to have 27 red crossbill call types. I don't expect that at all, actually. I have a pretty good finger on the pulse. This is the eruptive map, or the proximate range map for this particular call type. I don't know. Yeah, it looks like you guys are, all of Wisconsin, or part of Wisconsin, I should say, isn't it? And, I published a paper with Nick Anich and Ryan a few years ago on the Atlas, when a lot of the Atlas was going on for Wisconsin. And it's one of the best crossbill papers I've actually ever been a part of. They got it right down to call type and did a kind of like, documented nesting of several of the different call types. I think there was at least confirmed breeding of 4 different call types in the state that 2017, 2018 year, and they were pretty key. They were part of the this paper that we hope that will be out in the next month or so here about this type 12 call type. We did a PCA, which is a principal component analysis that kind of lumps sounds together. And so this bird we used to actually tell people, put it in as Eastern type 10, because type 10 is actually mostly a Western bird along the Pacific Northwest. But anyway, I don't want to get too far in the weeds on that. Wait 1 second. I think I hear some voices here. Let me just close the door. Yeah. Close the door. So just moving towards evening grosbeak. This bird has experienced a 92% decline since 1970. We are co-leading an international road to recovery working group. There's only 4 species that have been recognized on this road to recovery in North America. So there's a decent amount of funds that are going after this. We will be in Sax-Zim Bog, me, and it's collaborative with the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, Powder Mill, Carnegie Museum, and the Finch Research Network will be up in Sax-Zim, and we'll be actually putting radio tags on these birds, actually, just to try to get an idea of connectivity between seasons and to fill in some knowledge gaps of what could be causing these declines. We obviously know budworm cycles play a role in it. There's the actual decline now. I'm not showing the last couple of years. There has been an uptick. It would not be a huge uptick, but there is an uptick in the last 2 of the last 4 years with evening grosbeaks. I don't expect people to read this. It is one of the more fascinating, or if not the most fascinating birds in the in the East here, or any natural history stories really for North America. It was a bird that was actually not documented east of the Western Great Lakes until the 1850s was the first time it was kind of east of the Great Lakes. It landed in Toronto for the very first time in like 1878, and it wasn't until 1890 that they had any records on the East Coast at all, actually. And a lot of people kind of point towards this baited highway with the plantings of box elders, and then they got here and there was this huge eruption of, or not eruption, but outbreak of budworm that led to this baby making factory. And a lot of us that have been around, I kind of wasn't around old enough at this time, but I've talked to a lot of the the senior ornithologists in the States, and they'll talk about, they'll wax poetically, or they'll complain on how much they ate them out of house and home, and on how much, when they were growing up, there were flocks of these everywhere back in the 60s and 70s and even into the 80s. So we have this road to recovery project. We put a poster together where we'll be going. We put tags on birds. So this is part of this road to recovery process. Evening grosbeak is recognized as a high urgency bird. We're in phase 1 right now. We do know what some of the threats, or at least we're dialing in focal groups that will try to tackle some of these knowledge gaps that might be leading to the declines. Spruce bloodworm cycles, habitat change. We just had somebody from the USGS, apparently they went through all the old USGS records of collisions, window collisions, and evening grosbeaks are actually in the top 3. Disease, again, these birds are social. It's easy to get disease transmitted at feeders. There's also climate change issues. And then there's also the Road to Recovery pilot project that we just put tags on birds in the last 2 years. And this project's actually started in 2017, 2021 in Pennsylvania, where David Yenny was actually banding these birds or tagging these birds at his father's house in Western Pennsylvania. And it is now, last year, they put they were doing bands on them, but also putting nano tags, which are the Modus Tower tags. And now like I said, we have these sunbird tags, which are actually activated by the satellite and sun just last year. The nano tags are only 200 a tag. The sunbird tags are 2,000 a tag. So we actually got some really cool maps that are going to come out soon, showing some of this connectivity between populations of evening grosbeaks. And he just puts his first sun tags on birds in Pennsylvania this past weekend. We'll be doing some more of that in SACSIM, but we put 30 on in Maine last March and April as well. Or 11, I should say, I'm sorry, 30 nano tags and 11 of the satellite tags. So we're using these bow nets, and here are the tags. They're kind of like backpacks that basically give you, Modus tags with nano tags. The Modus towers, the bird has to go over the tower to give a signal and for you to get any kind of read on them. Whereas with these sun tags, you get readings on them as long as you have some sunlight, which sometimes that can be a stretch in parts of the particularly where I live here in central New York. There's our crew that was up there, and there's a tag. There's 2 birds that were tagged there, and you can see when one went due north and one went almost all the way to Saskatchewan. And then there's this local bird that went around in Maine there that you can see in the kind of in this figure on the right side, where you have this bird kind of those are all the readings we had on that one bird. So some areas also we're moving towards is become a winter finch forecaster, which I was just talking about a few minutes ago or 10 minutes ago. We are looking so we just kind of we have a newsletter now. You can become a member of the Finch Research Network, and we put out kind of an exclusive newsletter. We just kind of did a winter finch wrap. We're going to do Hawaii honey creepers, and the next one is going to be the main focus. And in the spring, we're working on this iNaturalist project, where you can, basically the deal is, and we're beta testing it now, is you can walk up, you can become a finch forecaster by basically you walk up to a tree. If you happen to see a fruit crop on it, you can take a picture of it. We're going to put methods out around how to assess this. It'll be obviously qualitative, not quantitative, because it's really hard. It's not apples to apples when you're assessing deciduous trees to conifers to fruiting trees, or even a small hemlock cone to a big white pine cone. It's very hard to kind of standardize the methods around that. So we're just looking for basically qualitative data, and that's how the finch forecast has really been generated over the last last 2 decades plus now, is just people going out and doing an assessment of their area of what is, a crop look like that year on the various species. So with this iNaturalist, if people are familiar with this, you'd be able to take a picture, kind of have methods that will be a guide. You can take the picture, upload it, then rank the cone crop or the fruit crop or the deciduous tree crop, and then you give it a ranking and it can go in there. And if you happen to see a bird on it, you can actually add that sighting as well. And we're hoping to launch that as spring hits, because fruit crops or cone crops or any fruiting crop or seed crops, they form in the middle of, they basically form between May and July. So this is the project I'm talking about, Finch Forecast Food Assessment. It's in there now. It again is just being beta tested and working on the methods around how people will hopefully be able to learn and do this. I'm doing this with Tyler right now. So you can see, you know, there's some observations in there. The big thing we're, you know, trying to kind of figure out is how to get people to assess ages. Some conifers actually will have multiple ages of cones on their tree. So we're doing this as well. So we have the Evening Grosbeak Road Recovery Project. We also have this Winter Finch food assessment, Become a Finch Forecaster project that's going on. And here again is the ranking of the food crops. And then, you know, you could put an observation on foraging species down here as well. So you basically, you know, it's not live right now, but it's what did you see? You could type in the species that you saw. You can upload it. When did you see it is the date. You could put in some notes, and then down here you would put the species if you happen to see the species on it. And, you know, so in the last few 2-3 months here since we launched the Finch forecast this year, actually since, you know, the end of September, we've accomplished some big things. We described a new crossbill call type that I've been working on for better part of 5 years. We're part of this. We're co-leading this Evening Grosbeak Road to Recovery project, which we have people from across the country part of this, and we're gonna, like I said, we're going to be going to ZachSim. We also put out the newsletter, but we have a feeder cam in Maine. This is a big piece of like the Grosbeak project and citizen science. And grosbeaks are going to be one of the species that you can do kind of this food assessment. We're going to focus on 5 species, the 2 crossbills, the red pole, and the 2 grosbeaks. But feeder cam, you know, people that can't get out as much, we wanted to make it so people could see these birds. There's a few feeder cams across the northern part of this continent, not that many though. There's a foothills birds in British Columbia. There's obviously the Cornell Lab one in Ontario, and then we have this one in Maine. This was only this was a week ago with snowstorm. This is from Woodland, Maine. It's right on the border with New Brunswick. And yeah, he's Bill Sheehan is hosting upwards of 50 to 100 evening grosbeak. It varies from week to week. And then a big mixed flock of goldfinches and pine siskins. And there was a rare subspecies of common redpoll there as well. And that is the YouTube channel at Finch Network, at Finch Research Network. We also have apparel. We have this Road to Recovery. We have a couple of iterations of this shirt. We're out right now, but we will have new ones in stock fairly soon on the website as well. We have a Rosy Finch one we're going to put out too. We're also part of the Rosy Finch working group. Climate change is a huge issue around this species because, you know, a lot of these mountaintop birds, there's birds that are moving up the mountain and eventually birds that are at the top. I mean, this is a bird. There's 3 species in the group, obviously, you know, gray crowned, brown capped, and black rosy finches. They're all mountaintop breeders. They're some of the highest, if not the highest altitude breeding birds in North America. And their populations are in pretty big decline, it appears. So we're going to have a new shirt that'll come out here fairly soon, actually. This is the Finch Forecast shirt that we've been putting out. And then, you know, I'm working on the Finches of North American book with Lillian. That's actually due out now in the spring of 2024. We have a deadline here in 6 weeks that we got to have the manuscript in. It's actually going to be Finches of the United States and Canada, since we're actually not doing Mexico, and we wanted to be accurate, particularly in today's day and age. It's important to be honest and accurate about things. So that'll be out soon, and it's super, super exciting. We actually got I would have threw it in there, but it was right as I was walking out the door. We actually got the draft cover from the publishing company back today, right as I was walking out the door. So overall, the Finch Forecast and Finch Research Network goals, we're looking at, this become a Finch forecaster. We're also interested in increasing the diversity of reporter backgrounds for various projects, whether it's First Nation, Indigenous people, researchers, naturalists, bird atlasers. We got this development of this iNaturalist project, increase education and healthy feeding habits and wellness around feeder watching of finches, and then increase awareness around finches in Hawaii, continue red crossbill research and being part of the Rosie Finch Working Group, and create a conservation plan for evening grosbeak, an iconic species that has declined 92% since 1970. FiRN's a nonprofit, 501c3. We can be found finchnetwork.org and also on various social media platforms at the Finch Masters on Facebook and on Instagram. And there's also a discussion board called Finch's Irruptions and Mass Crops. That's all I have, but thank you again for listening to me, and it's always a pleasure to talk to everybody, and I can hang out for however long people want. My voice is pretty good tonight to take any questions.
Well, thanks, Matt. That was really interesting. I never knew that there were different types of evening grosbeaks. So I knew of the red crossbills, but I didn't know that. I'll tell you my story. Evening grosbeaks, I think I was 11 years old. I took the Agawa Canyon train trip out of Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. It goes about 100 miles north along the eastern half of Lake Superior. At the turnaround point, you got your picnic lunch, and there was a picnic table. There was a bird feeder there with these gigantic, huge, monstrous yellow birds. And from that point on, it was like, it literally took my breath away. I mean, they were huge and so gorgeous. And it was probably another 40 to 50 years since I saw another one. And now this, so about every other year we make a trip up to the Zaxiam Bog to go see part of evening grosbeaks, part of the lure of that area. But yeah, I could look at those for a while.
Yeah, it's a bit of, so it sounds like a bit of a spark bird for you.
Yeah.
Nice. Now, was that summertime? I'm taking that was summertime.
Yes, that was.
Very cool.
So what can we as a group or as a bird club do to help support you or support the cause? Can we go on the Finch Research Network? There's a website. Is there, can we make donations? How can we?
Absolutely. I can, let me just go back here. So, making recordings is also really cool. I mean, we don't have, the interesting thing about evening grosbeak is they don't wander around as much as red crossbill. So recording them here in the East, there's only been type really 3, recorded here in the East. Crossbills, though, are the most common species by about 25% in Macaulay Library collection. I think probably, kind of got that rolling while I was working there. But what you could do, we're going to have more shirts out, but if you want to sign up for the newsletter, it's $20. There'll be 4 newsletters a year. We might do some giveaways at a certain point. We'll try to keep the, content fairly exclusive. And it's just to generate some funds. We're going to be making, some of the money that we just made off of our first membership. Our newsletter is going to go to the Maui recovery team for a lot, the Hawaiian honey creeper project. So, small donations, even if you can't do that, record birds, put in your sightings, those kinds of things. If there's anybody out there that loves to write, we're always looking for blog writers, or even if it was an experience like yourself and you really like to write about your experience with grosbeaks, like you were just telling me about, we would put up a blog on that. I mean, we're really about generating enthusiasm around finches. So there's a lot of different ways you can get either actively engaged in the field, making a donation from joining for the membership in the newsletter, or making a bigger donation. There's a lot, or buying a shirt when we have them. We'll have another round of shirts in here in a few weeks. It's just that we sold out for the holiday, and we're trying to also come up with that new design that I just showed you for the rosy finches. We're gonna have an Hawaii shirt out too here at some point. And Bird Collective, which is another apparel company, also chose the Finch Research Network right out of the gate. It was pretty amazing, really. Again, one of those kind of serendipitous moments. Chose us as also an organization to do an apparel line. So you can actually buy apparel through the Bird Collective site. So if you just Google Bird Collective, there's another round of apparel that you can buy, a water bottle and a shirt and a sweatshirt. And I think there's a hat. There's a winter hat on there too. Certain amount of the proceeds will go to the Finch Research Network as well. So a lot of different ways. We're always looking to expand the board too, skill set. So there's a lot of different ways. Anybody has any interest, or they are a budding finchophile, like a lot of us often call ourselves, by all means, reach out. Any other questions though out there?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. We'll definitely include your information here in our next newsletter and recaps and all that, and we'll pass along Finch Network stuff in our little bitty newsletter, and I'll pass the word in my bird world. So definitely recommend go to finchnetwork.org. So we have any questions from the audience? You can unmute yourself or
I saw one in the chat there. Somebody said, I live in the hemlock forest, and why I've never seen a finch. That's a good question. I mean, I'm surprised you wouldn't have seen at least pine siskins or purple finches, which are, the eruptive ones. Now, house finches and goldfinches are fairly ubiquitous. I don't know if you see a lot of those in your region. I imagine you probably see a certain amount of those, right? In southern Wisconsin?
Yes. House finches, goldfinches, yes.
Yeah.
Just about
not a good year for siskins this year. Any purple finches you seeing?
We had some early, I would say September, and haven't seen any since probably early October.
Yeah.
We may pick them up on the rebound then, I would say probably April-ish as they're heading back north.
Yeah, it's kind of the thing, these birds seem to settle in areas where there's not only bird feeders, but you kind of need a somewhat of a wild food crop as well. So if your area is not a good place for a wild food crop, in the particular year that they're leaving the boreal, they can easily bypass you. I know there's been a pretty big white ash crop. There's a lot of white ashes that are dying from the emerald ash borer, and there's been a big crop of white ash, and I've seen both grosbeaks on this year on white ash trees. In fact, I talked to Sparky Stensis today, who's the executive director there up at Saxim, Friends of Saxim, and he says he's seen pine grosbeaks actually on white ash quite a bit this winter. So any other questions though out there? Yes, go ahead.
Last year, I'd say we had a good eruptive year of white-winged crossbills. That was another one that it's been probably 10, 15 years since we had them, and we had them from, I would say, October all the way up until the middle of May was the last ones that I saw right here in southern Wisconsin, and that's very unusual to get them that late.
Yeah, I mean that's what's great about these finches is a lot of times they're like little Christmas presents and stuff. I mean, they're so colorful. I mean, you must have got some of that redpoll eruption last year too, didn't you? I mean, it was huge.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
When we had those about every 3 to 5 years, some big ones. I haven't seen any at all this year, but yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions out there? Well, you're gonna save my voice tonight. It's quiet in the crowd.
Yeah, if anybody wants to unmute and ask the question and rather than typing, that's certainly fine as well.
I'm gonna stop the share here.
Okay, there we go.
Let me see. Anybody else? All right. Yeah. Thanks, Mary. Always good to get the compliments. It's always again, it's always great doing these. I do a number of these a year now, probably, I don't know, anywhere from 6 to 12 of them I'm doing, and Tyler's doing them as well. So if you want to know about honey creepers or Hawaii, finches of Hawaii, next year, please do keep me in mind.
Okay, we will keep you in mind on that. We did have somebody who worked for the Nature Conservancy, I believe, and was on the islands and trying to eradicate, cats and rats and wild hogs. And yeah, that was eye-opening. It had fences, in protected areas to try to, keep the native birds and the non-native stuff out. I mean, what a sad situation. I mean,
yeah, it's kind of amazing that it seems like a lot of us here in the mainland haven't, it's kind of gone, it's not really on people's radar. It seems like it's only on people's radars that are like wanting to make sure they get it on their checklist. But yeah, it's there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of I don't want to give all the presentation, but there's there's this ABC, American Bird Conservancy program called Birds Not Mosquitoes, and there's a non-native mosquito there that's causing avian malaria, and there's only 1 or 2 species at low elevations that seem to have a resistance to it. And there's mosquitoes have a Wolbachia bacteria in their gut that they basically, well, not in their gut necessarily, but it's all mosquitoes have a type of bacteria in them, and they have to be compatible to breed for their populations to grow. And so one of the things that ABC is working on is this program where they're trying to inoculate the males to have an incompatible Wolbachia bacteria, so when they mate, they'll be infertile. Any kind of eggs, they won't hatch. So that's one of the ways they're hoping to manage mosquito populations there, because these mosquitoes, in one little bite, and basically these birds have no resistance and they're dying. It's a really tragic kind of thing, but there's a lot of different things going on right now. Captive breeding programs, there's also a program on GMOs, which are somewhat controversial, genetically modifying the mosquitoes as well, because a lot of the experts don't think the Wolbachia thing will be a fix-all. And there's 4 of the 17 species left that are right on the critical edge of the cliff. And we're going to be doing, we'll have a chapter on the finches in Hawaii in the book that we're doing, Lillian and I are doing. So we're just trying to continue to try to raise awareness around this species group. So anyway, I appreciate all the nice, kind comments in the chat here. So, but anyway, go ahead, Jeff.
So you said that the book will be out in 24?
Yeah, the new release date is March 2024. We're hoping to get it out just before the holiday, but there's bottlenecks in publishing and printing, and we were running a little bit behind as well, and everybody just decided, let's kick this thing out 6 months. So but I have a deadline, a manuscript deadline. In fact, I took off half of this week from my day job to to write, actually. I've written 10,000 words in the last week here for the book. I did the honey creepers, and I did a chapter on eruptions and migrations and eruptions, or movements and eruptions. So, and I have a research and conservation chapter I'm working on as well. So it's not going to be a field guide. It's going to be a field guide plus. It's going to have some really interesting anecdotes, and Lillian has done some fabulous writing, some kind of like quirky, interesting historical perspectives on 17 core species that we have breeding here in the mainland. Then there's 8 vagrants, and then there's another 17 that are kind of reduced accounts on the Hawaii birds as well, the Hawaii finches. So yeah, it's exciting. We just, like I said, I just got the drafts back from the publisher before I left the house to come do this. So
yeah, Matt.
Yes.
Is there any? I know you probably had it in the your verbiage in your presentation, but I've had evening grosbeaks, crossbills here at my place, and it's usually during an eruption year, 96 and 4 or 5 years ago, and then again last year. Is there a particular seed and bird feeder that you would suggest that you think is best?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, Lillian, so we have, the main species I just laid out to you, and we're going to have these additional chapters. Lillian actually wrote another chapter, an additional chapter on how to attract finches to your feeders. And so with evening grosbeaks, they're voracious appetites for sunflower seed, and they like larger tray or platform feeders. So, it's interesting because nobody really, in my opinion, has cornered the market on making a feeder that's perfect for evening grosbeaks. The best feeders I often see for evening grosbeaks are these homemade feeders that have roofs on them, in a big container that hold like 10 pounds, 20 pounds of seed, and then a big platform around them that they can kind of hang out on. So that's what I recommend to people. Audubon and various others have these hanging tray feeders. Those are very good. Hopper feeders will work for them as well, but they need a big enough ledge to kind of hang out on to feed. And they love sunflower seed. Now, they're one of the only finches that really can easily also open up the gray striped. I don't know how many people buy that anymore. It's a little harder to find. It's a little more expensive. But that bill is so big, it can open up the gray striped, whereas the black oil is kind of universal. The universal seed, 90% of the seed feeding industry is made up of black oil sunflower. In fact, I'm on the research committee for the Wild Bird Feeding Institute, and we're hoping to do a study that seed sales or finch eruptions drive seed sales to some degree. Because there's years, I mean, you saw that footage of Ryan's backyard with all those red poles, and that's going to drive seed sales. I know there's been local shortages of sunflower, and there has been local shortages of Niger in particular years. We get these huge eruptions of siskins and red poles. So hopefully that answers your question on evening grosbeak, but they like platform feeders with sunflower seed or tray feeders.
Yeah, I know that Ryan's been going through pounds and pounds of
yeah, he started a GoFundMe site. That was the first one.
that I saw.
I was the first one to donate $40. I figured I'll buy him a 50 pound bag for him. I mean, it's not a cheap thing nowadays when you're feeding that many evening grosbeaks. They literally had the nicknames in the literature of grocery beaks and gross pigs. I don't know if a lot of you might have read that one slide. Grocery beaks and gross pigs were two nicknames that are in the literature if you kind of like go through it. Anyway, any other questions? Sorry, go ahead.
I think it was in 2019 or 2020 I actually kept track of the number of pounds of seed that I fed that year, and I've got maybe a half a dozen, I don't know, 3 or 4 feeders. 1,120 pounds of seed I bought, black oil sunflower seed I bought just that year.
Wow. Yeah, we we have this feeder cam, which is super exciting. I mean, it's just getting more and more views every day. Please do visit it. It's just, it's YouTube at Finch Research Network. And we delivered, it's a cool, a collaborative project with Aspen Song Bird Seed, and Aspen Song actually delivered 1 ton of sunflower seed, $1,700 retail of sunflower seed via liftgate to Woodland, Maine, which is, you can see New Brunswick from Woodland, Maine, if you just go like a half a mile to a mile beyond this house where this feeder cam is. So, yeah. And he has 50 to 100 evening grosbeaks every day. Although the raptors have been really kind of, there's a Sharpie that cycles through, a Merlin that cycles through, and a goshawk that cycles through, actually.
Well, excellent. Thanks again, Matt. Thanks for your presentation. Wonderful presentation. Last call for questions if I have any. And we got your address, and we'll be mailing that honorarium to you.
All right. Hey, I appreciate it.
And we appreciate the information. I will spread the word on the Finch Research Network. And good luck with your rest of your research. And till next time, then.
Yeah, till next time. Keep me in mind. All right. Have a good one. Take care, everybody.
See how much he got? 1,400.